Okay, Michelle, are we back to broadcasting? Great. How is everyone doing? Good. Ready for the final stretch? Wendy is plugging in. The Viking, we're all ready for the Viking, aren't we? I think more importantly, the Viking is ready for us at this point, right? Special welcome back to Amy. Great to see you. She wants to see the Viking too, but also hopefully as much as anything else to celebrate the approval of the ISA for LCE standard. So I think I'm going to turn it right over to the man who is now known as the Viking at the board table. Kai, over to you. I think we're going to sound the horn.
Thank you, Tom, and happy to be back and happy to be at this stage of the project. So there is no horn yet. We'll see it later on. You received after discussion yesterday you received updated documents of both the proposed standard and the conforming amendments. After we had those discussions, we received a few minor comments from a few board members. So I'll walk through the changes that we've done. You've all seen the changes, but I'll just talk through them so that we've done that also on public record. I think if we start with the main standard first, which would be document 2G. The first change was P14. Give you a second so that you can get there, and also myself. I remember we had a discussion where that paragraph would go around certain requirements in EM, only applicable for engagement team members other than engagement partner. We have, as you see, we've now moved that into a hanging paragraph below P14, as that didn't really attach to any of the other bullets. The next is 2.4.1. We added a sentence there based on the discussion we had in the board meeting, comment I think raised by Eric. So we added the first sentence there in EM. After we sent out the document, we received some comments on that from different board members, and the suggestion is to delete the sentence we inserted, as it's identical to the definition of audit documentation, so there's no need to repeat it. The next change is 6.7.1. Lots of navigating here. We should have had more changes, so it's not that much browsing. Let's see. 6.7.1. Yeah. We've combined earlier we had a bullet A and B. We changed the wording in B to be more in line with what we have in the ISAs, and also combine it with bullet A. And then we're also consistent with how we do it in the same parts in the other parts of the ISAs. The next one is the EM below 7.3.1. We've added the paragraph there at the end based on the comments Kai Uwe raised at the board meeting on Tuesday. It is a lift from ISA 330 paragraph A4. I think the only difference is that we refer to the paragraph in this standard where that is mentioned. So it's a direct lift from the ISAs. So it's a concept you should already know about. The next one is 7.4.28. It's a suggestion from Eric on the board meeting Tuesday to clarify which further audit procedures the auditors may perform. We added a few examples based on ISO 402-826. We have had some calls for additional EM to be added. We would feel that would put it out of balance, because then it would add quite a lot on cases that may not be that frequent. So that's it. Then we have the next is 8.6.1. Written representation. The suggestion there is in the added sentence to take out management in the last sentence, as this whole paragraph then talks about management. So the last sentence then would read, the responsibilities shall be described in the same way in the representation as described in the terms of engagement. And this whole sentence talks about written representation from management. Then the last one, I believe, in this document is 9.4.1. It's a sentence we discussed a little bit with the board on Tuesday, and there was some discussion on that in the board meeting. We have now, as you see, moved a sentence earlier in that paragraph to make it more clear. And I think after we sent out the requirement, there has been one additional change suggested. In the last sentence, it's referring to the audit report include elements of a specified form and content. We suggest then that to format and content rather than form. Those were the changes to the standard, if I remember them all. And then we have in the conforming amendments to H, all the changes there are things we are based on the discussion we had and the comments received. I think the only one that we've had some additional discussion around, and we're suggesting, or I think asking the board on this one, it's if you look into paragraph A8 on ISQM1 and paragraph A0A in ISQM2, they're identical. We suggested, based on comments received in the board meeting Tuesday, shorter sentence to replace what we had. I think we've received some comments that it's now difficult to see what it means. So our suggestion is to go back to the original sentence that we had on Tuesday. And that would then be, instead of having the sentence being references within the application material to the ISOs are to be read as their equivalent in the ISO for LCE when applicable, we'll go back to the sentence below that's struck out in certain instances and so on. I think those were the changes that we wanted to highlight. So I guess I can turn back to you, Tom, if there are any comments or questions from the board.
I would say that the Viking's the best dressed Viking I've ever seen. Very sharp today.
Yeah, Vikings always dress for the occasion.
Yeah, the red power tie too with it. Don't let it go. Did go unnoticed. Now Josephine and I feel a little bit behind the times because we didn't have coordination like our IAASB counterparts. Okay, any comments on the proposed changes from the last session? Thank
you, Tom. Yeah, I was a little bit surprised by the very last comment you made, Kai. I actually thought that the changes made in ISQM 1 and 2 in the draft circulated were much better than what we discussed on Tuesday. It was the reason why we had a discussion on Tuesday. And I'm disappointed that it goes back. I'm not going to die in a ditch over it, but I thought it was much better in the way it was circulated. So yeah, yeah,
And I-
appreciate the concern, but I just don't see it.
Well, I know someone is concerned the other way. So Isabel.
Yes, when I heard the proposal on Monday, I thought, well, it's great, but reading it cold, reading references within the application material to ISAs are to be read as their equivalent in the ISA for LCE when applicable. So first challenge is what is their equivalent in the ISA for LCE? Are we meaning that ISAs are equivalent to ISA for LCE? It's strange. For the people that have not been in the room, probably they will not get it. And the final as applicable. So you don't know if it's when ISA for LCE applies, or is it, or if it is, and that's why it's there, when there is an equivalent in ISA for LCE to what we have in the ISA. So probably nobody that has not been in this room will understand that sentence. And I was also struggling with understanding the way it's written in English, which is not that common, and the way we could translate it in foreign language. And I shared with some other people that struggled with the same point. So we thought that maybe even if it was longer and less elegant, it was more clear to have the two sentences that we had on Monday. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone object to the reversion? No. And Ada pointed out that it wasn't a fatal issue, though you preferred the revision. Okay. Any other comments on the proposed standard? I see no comments on it. That means that we're almost up to the point of vote. But before we have a vote, I think it's only appropriate for me to ask Jim if you have any observations.
I did look at the proposed changes, and my general observation was that the CAG was involved in the standard from the beginning, and we did follow the due process. And I have no additional comments. I'd like to just for the task force, congratulate them for getting where they are today. It was a huge amount of work. I think it was hard to envision an LCE standard at one point in time. So congratulations.
Janine, on behalf of the PIOB.
I also like to congratulate you with the result that you have now here, these LCE standards, which is very important to address and prevent jurisdictional fragmentation. So a good place to be now here. Thank you.
This brings us to a very important element, is the assessment of our due process, Billy.
Thank you, Tom. So the board would have noticed we circulated a separate agenda item 6, that is entitled Due Process for Proposed ISA for LCE. So you will see in agenda item 6, it sets out the status of the due process followed in relation to this project under the headings that address the background and due process up to the date of this meeting. And I wish to advise that due process has been followed effectively and with proper regard for the public interest in relation to the development of the ISA for LCE up to as well as during the September 2023 IAASB meeting. Thank you, Tom.
Any comments? Okay, I think we're at the critical moment. I think we're ready to vote on the LCE standard as drafted and as revised following our last brief discussion. Is everyone ready to vote and understand what we're voting on? Including, I believe, we're dealing with the conforming amendments as well, which is agenda paper 2H. We'll do them as a package. Is everyone comfortable with that? Okay, we're gonna do it in the following way. We're gonna take the votes in favor, support first, then we're gonna ask for dissents, and then we're gonna ask for the abstentions. So who wants to vote in support of the approval of the LCE standard? I think we have, is it 17? Any dissents? 0. Any abstentions? The record note 1. Okay, so at this moment, we will ask Josephine to provide the rationale for your abstention.
Okay, so thank you. I would be remiss, of course, if I did not firstly acknowledge and thank the LC Task Force and staff for their incredibly hard work and dedication to the project and the development of the standard and responding to my comments always. And congratulations. You should be so proud. Voting is a privilege, and to abstain was not an easy decision for me. But before I decided on how I would vote, I recall at some point someone mentioned that the only reason you abstain is if you don't have sufficient information available to make a vote either way. But actually, I looked at the guidance around Robert's Rules of Order, and there are a number of reasons why a board member might thoughtfully abstain. In my situation, it's a bit of an internal conflict as well as combined with insufficient information. I agree there is a clear public interest need to address complexity and understandability of the standards as they are applied to less complex entities. And I supported that project objective and continue to work with my fellow board members in development of the standard that's in the public interest, which including making sure that there are appropriate requirements in place designed to achieve a quality audit of a less complex entity. And the task force have worked hard to retain important requirements in that regard and avoid any kind of loopholes. On the other hand, I cannot ignore the fact that the requirements in ICES are by their very nature supported by application material for a really important reason, more than one important reason, in fact, which is to encourage the consistent exercise of appropriate professional judgment in the application of the principles-based requirements. Similar, interestingly, actually, to some comments we received in the feedback on our audit evidence standard in respect to requirements, without application material, there is a real danger that the differences in professional judgment will result in inconsistent application of the principles, open-ended requirements, or requirements subject to interpretation without any guidance, which in fact may increase the risk of improper application, as auditors may find it difficult without context to understand what is expected of them. To build requirements to help them this way would actually end up making them too granular and more rules and principles, which is against our core beliefs. The argument I have heard that auditors applying LCE standard can just look at the application material in the ICES to help them understand the objective, scale their work and so forth, to me completely defeats the purpose of this project, which was to deliver a standalone standard. In the absence of adequate application material in the standard and the practitioner having knowledge of the ICES, I struggle to see how the standard could be applied consistently, be scalable and proportionate to be appropriate applied to a wide range of less complex entities with varying circumstances, and therefore provide a basis for reasonable assurance. On the other hand, I go back to my first point that despite these concerns, we have addressed the public interest need to address complexity and understandability of the standards as they're applied to less complex entities. Hence my internal conflict. Once again, thank you, Kai, task force and staff for addressing so many of my comments. And again, congratulations.
Thank you, Josephine. Okay, Vili, the next question, as you know, we separate the question of approval of the document and the need for re-exposure. I want to ask you to address the rationale conclusion on whether re-exposure of the standard is warranted.
Thank you, Tom. And in the issues paper in agenda item 2, you would have seen that the task force has presented their rationale around the consideration of the need for re-exposure. It is contained in paragraphs 59 to 68 of the issues paper. And I would maybe just highlight a few items. In paragraph 65, the task force has set out in a table format the significant matters that were raised by respondents to the exposure draft. and the task force's responses to those significant matters that were raised. Also in Appendix 3 to the issues paper, we've included the public interest matters that were highlighted in the project proposal and how those project interest matters were addressed through the proposals in the development of the standard. And we've also linked those to the qualitative standard setting characteristics in the public interest framework. The task force is of the view that the changes that have been made post the 2 exposure drafts have been responsive to the comments received, also taking into account the overall consideration of the quality and outcome to be achieved for these types of audit engagements. Therefore, the task force is of the belief that it would not be in the public interest if the project is not finalized at this stage. I also do want to highlight that during this project was unique in the sense that we had 2 exposure drafts. You will all remember that we had a separate exposure draft on part 10 that deals with group audits. And it is important to note for the record that on the comments that we received on that exposure draft, there were 3 respondents that indicated the challenge they had in responding to the exposure draft because they didn't see the complete picture because the standard was being revised, the rest of the standard was being revised in the background. The task force did consider this issue and concluded that this is not a pervasive issue. Also considering the rich feedback that we did receive on the exposure draft, and in the context also of how part 10 was presented in the exposure draft, in the sense that we did explain in the exposure draft what the key changes were to the overall standard at that point in time, with links to all the board papers that were available. So in conclusion, we believe that the key elements of the 2 exposure drafts have been retained, obviously have been modified and clarified based on the comments that we've received, and that we have not departed from the project objectives. We believe that there are no key concepts that have been introduced that have not been exposed. And we also believe that re-exposing will not re-exposure will not result in new information or concerns on matters previously aired. Therefore, all the task force members are in agreement that there is no need to re-expose the standard. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Anyone wish to comment on the analysis as Vili laid it out? I see no comments. So now we're going to vote on whether, Janine?
Yes, I'd like to make one comment. That's about what Willie was talking about on respondents that provided feedback about a need for re-exposure of the full standards. And we were thinking that it might be good to also have those arguments included in the basis for conclusions with the reasons why not going for re-exposure, because these were missing in the issues paper, these specific arguments that those respondents made, like IRBA and IAASB, I remember. Thank you.
Thank you. We should be able to do that. Also, like we've included the qualitative characteristics of the PIF, even though this was a project done pre-PIF in the paper. Okay, so let's take a vote on whether re-exposure is required. Remember that we will require 12 affirmative votes seeking re-exposure for a re-exposure to be required. So what we will do is, I guess, how do you say, do this? Let's do it this way. I never know what we're supported or rejected. Does anyone believe that re-exposure is required? Does anyone want to abstain from the vote on re-exposure? Do you agree with the proposition that re-exposure is not required, by show of hands? Okay, all 18, unanimous. So let's turn to Kai once more to reconfirm the effective date of this approved standard.
Thank you, Tom. As written in paragraph 1.1.1, and as we discussed earlier this week, the standard is effective for audits of financial statements of LCEs for periods beginning on or after December 15th, 2025. And as we also discussed earlier, that we will in the explanatory memorandum say that the early adoption is allowed and encouraged.
Thank you, Kai. So really now this is the easy part. If I had a glass of champagne, I'd be holding it up and toasting Kai, the LCE task force, the staff involved, Amy, Jasper, Kazuko, Isabel. Well, certainly don't want to forget Bev, Kalina, and Dan's role in this project, and anyone on the board who has inputted. It hasn't always been easy. The Viking faced a steep uphill climb. I remember those early days of this on Zoom at all hours of night, where I remember having to speak to Bev afterwards and like, what are we going to do with the comments we just received? So it's an amazing job of the task force, Kai, your leadership, the staff, for being able to navigate up this treacherous mountain. And I think we're in a really great spot and have fulfilled one of our major strategic projects that we put on the agenda during my term. So I'm hugely grateful for all the work. It has really been a team effort. And I think based upon my outreach in recent months, it will be hugely welcome throughout the world. So Kai, over to you to see if you have any comments that you want to share.
Thank you. I think I first, Michelle, yeah, there it's working. First, you have the way forward. As we described earlier, this is just to remind you what's going to happen going forward. We will have the expected publication of the standard after the PIOB has had their approval in December. And we will continue working on the adoption implementation. And then, as you have there, with the effective date, December 15, 2025. You did refer to the journey. And as you see there, I think we're now at the top. You've been part of the journey, but I wanted to show you a little bit about how the journey really has been. So we're now going to the journey to the final standard, to the summit. And I've had the Viking ship on the table, but I also have a helmet. And as you saw earlier, we had a task force meeting in Oslo, and there's quite a lot of wannabe Vikings here as well. As you said, this has been a really long journey. We started in Paris. I had information gathering. You can see that we had, it was at that point the Nordics has been pushing, and this clicker is not working. And we had a conference and see that the Nordics have been pushing for this for a while, and I think that was some of the reasoning for this discussion coming to the table and the information gathering. And it's probably a little bit small to see on the slide, but it says, let's face this challenge, it will not go away. And by working together globally, we can find the best solution. And we, being the Nordics, are fully committed. And I think I can say that I've been working on this topic since, I think, 2014. So it's been a few years. So based on the discussions that were in Paris, there was an informal working group developed under Arnold's leadership as the prior chair, and Chuck Landis was on that together with Brandon Murtaugh and Gordon Cummings. We had a couple of meetings. You can just click in. We were in Dublin afterwards, and then we went on to have the board to start the conversation when we, after Tom came in, started with the development of the discussion paper. So we went at that point, started the journey, and we had the Viking ship with us there as well, and then that led to the discussion paper with another conference in Paris, and we had Roger Simnett leading that project. You can go on, Michelle. And next one. And we had the feedback statement, and then if you go to the next, we continued the journey, and as you all remember, something happened. We had COVID. So we started with Zoom. And I don't know how many hours I've spent on Zoom. I feel like I've spent a couple of years in Zoom together, first with Bev and also task force meetings. And next one, and then also with Amy later on. I think we would never have been at this stage without the help of staff, and especially those two. They've been doing quite a lot of heavy lifting. This is a picture reminding us how great it was being in those 2 years. This is when we all approved the project proposal in December 2020. If you look closely, you probably could see that there are a few tired faces there, probably in the middle of the night for quite a lot of them. And then all the discussions around applicability. So we were stranded in the Suez Canal for one point. We managed to get the ship sailing. And we continued to find a few summits along the way. So the Viking thought it was at the top, but it wasn't. So we had a new exposure draft, the ED of group 10, part 10, the group session. Another round of conference in Paris with Tom's leadership. Again, we were stuck a little bit with applicability and wondering whether we would reach the summit. We got the ship sailing again. And along the way, we picked up Dutch Viking, an expert on group audits. So we managed to get the ship to the proposed final standard. And go on again. So we're now at the top. So you see the Viking at the top, but if you look carefully tonight at the Empire State Building, if you zoom in, Michelle, if you click one more, you can zoom in. You can see the Viking at the top of the building. And after this meeting, we as a task force are going on a hike to a summit. So we'll all be there at the top of the mountain. As I said, there are lots of people to thank. We mentioned all the staff with Bev, Kalina along the way, Amy, Jasper, Dan, Kazuko, and Isabel. Also a lot of support for Tom. Thank you very much for that. I think it's been a great journey, and also Willie along the way. And I also like to thank you all fellow board members. You kept referring to this as my project. We all agreed on it, so it's our project. So we should all celebrate together. This is a great accomplishment. And now it turns into the next step to have jurisdictions adopt and implement the standard. So it will be very interesting and hopeful that people start picking this up and that we have a great adoption and implementation of the standard. Thank you for being on this journey and keeping an open mind. It's been rough at times, but we got there. Thank you.
Great. So congratulations again to the team, to the whole board. I think this is a real step forward. I did ask, but before we voted, but I'll say, Jim and Janine, anything more you'd want to add?
Well, maybe some overall comments on the meeting. Is that already, or is that for later? Otherwise,
we'll get to that in a second.
Then, yeah, I'd like to congratulate the task force, or should I say the Vikings, and the board with the approval of the standards, which is of course a great momentum. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, anything? Okay,
Also, congratulations, and I hope everyone has good pictures of certain individuals with hats.
great. Okay, Billy, maybe people are always interested in what next, where we go from approval to it being in a great formatted way on our website. So Billy, you want to give us an update?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. So after this meeting, as we normally do, we will post the final text, the final approved text on our meeting webpage. And the team has already started to work on the basis for conclusions. So we will continue to work on that. And as always, we will, at one point, we will circulate the basis for conclusions to the board for any fatal flaw reviews. We will also continue to complete the due process documentation that will then all be submitted as a package to the PIOB for their meeting in December, where the PIOB will then certify that due process has been followed for purposes of the standard. Hopefully, I think that if I remember correctly, the PIOB meeting in December is actually before our December board meeting, which means that if we get approval from the PIOB soon after that meeting, then we can actually go ahead and hopefully publish the standard even before the end of this year. So that's sort of the process, Tom. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, so before we have some concluding remarks, and Janine and Jim, I'll call on you as well, some administrative items. You know, it's been at least 2 days since I've talked about minutes, and you know how I love talking about minutes. So just so you know, the draft minutes of this meeting, if you want to relive it and not watch the video, will be distributed to the board for comment in due course. It will be posted in time for their approval at the December 2023 meeting. For the IAASB meetings in the fourth quarter, we will not be having a video call on October 19th, so you could clear your calendars. There's no video call either in the morning or the afternoon on October 19th. Our next quarterly meeting will be held during the week of December 11th to 14th in New York. That's a Monday to Thursday. As we've discussed, in general, we will be targeting 4-day meetings from now on. That will allow the fifth day of that week to be used for other matters and hopefully facilitate travel for many of you. I did want to let you know that we have scheduled meetings for March and June already. March meeting will be in New York from Monday to Thursday, the 18th to the 21st. I think it's our turn to meet at the AICPA's offices. Our June meeting will be 18 to 21, but it will not be in New York. It will be held in Madrid, and that will be Tuesday through Friday. We're hugely appreciative of the PIOB and the PIOB staff for helping us organize that meeting. It's helpful to them as well for us to start on a Tuesday. So we will run Tuesday to Friday. Hotels are already organized, and so we will be provided more details on that in due course as well. We're not quite done with our CAG meetings. We have one scheduled for December 7th in a form of a video conference. Those who are required to attend for the board, we will let you know. For the December 2023 meeting itself, if you're marking your calendar, you want to know when the papers will be available. And I'm sure after you finish this week, you want to read more board papers. Mark your calendars. November 13th will be when we start beginning posting. All materials will be posted by November 17th. And I think that is that in terms of administrative items. Well, Billy, have I missed anything?
No, that's all, Tom. Thanks.
Okay. Before we close, I want to turn to Janine and then Jim for any observations.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, a good meeting with a lot of good input, well prepared and led. And yesterday's sustainability assurance roundtable on ISA 5000 was very valuable with good food for thought, also to give direction to the task force, where to focus on ahead of ED responses to be received. Of which the ethics and independence related topics regarding group consolidated and value chain reporting are very important to cooperate closely on with the IAASB board, which was also discussed this morning together with that board. As PIB, we are very interested in the final proposal of the strategies and work plan for the December meeting on the integrated approach implications to technology in relation to ISA 500 and other standards in the 500 series. And we are also looking forward to the further changes to further clarify and strengthen the ED on fraud for consultation purposes, which approval is scheduled for the December meeting, which will provide valuable feedback also whether the transparency option with fraud under CAM will meet stakeholders' needs. And last but not least, congratulations again with the LCE approval. In that respect, we would like to encourage a continued dialogue with stakeholders, including those who have not been in favor of the LCE standard in view of its implementation. So thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Jim?
And I'd like to echo that. Congratulations to the LCE team. It has been a long time in coming, and so very excited that you involved the CAG throughout the process. With respect to fraud, appreciate that you were able to incorporate our feedback and at least consider our feedback at the board level. Audit evidence was, we had quite a discussion on audit evidence, so it will be very interesting to see where that leads, and appreciate, Sue, that you coming to our meeting on audit evidence. And we have provided input on the strategy and work plan. So thank you to the IAASB for considering the CAG's comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim and Janine. So we're at the final stretch for the public session of this board meeting. It's been a very productive week, but I'd be remiss, I don't know, it would be great to just acknowledge all the great work that our staff and TAs have done and helping out in getting this meeting to where we needed to get to have successful discussion. So I would like to give a round of applause to the team, and thank you for all your efforts. And also just really thankful to all of you. I usually say this in my one-on-ones to all the board members. It's sometimes easy to forget that you're volunteers and that you do this in addition to your day jobs and daily lives. And we're hugely appreciative. And I think the public service that you're performing is invaluable and helps to make the economy work better. And so thank you to all of you for your time and efforts and your insights throughout this week. Thank you for your advice. And I will continue to wish you continued efforts on our behalf. And so I know we're keeping you hard at work during the next quarter. Many of you helping out with a lot of our outreach. So thank you for that. And it really should be acknowledged for the public record. With that, I think it's time to close. And we're going to close right now. We'll take a 10-minute break and then we'll go into executive session. So great meeting and look forward to our upcoming discussions in December.